basically the point is that statistically, less stuff is happening to kids now. Like, physical abuse of children declined by 55% between 92 and 2011. Sexual abuse declined 64%. Abductions by strangers went down by 51%. So, like, I think also part of it might be the media hype that now, especially because we're exposed to more information, that we sense that there's a lot happening when actually it's way less than before.
It's called, I think, the mean world syndrome, where because if you watch the news every night, you're more likely to think that the world is kind of a terrible place because you always hear this, there was a car bomb here, there was a car bomb there, people are being kidnapped here. So I think it is because people see it more happening, like on TV, that they think, oh, it's happening constantly.
And it gets played on loops over and over. Oh, yeah. So you're like, it's the redundancy factor, too. You think that it's much bigger than it really is. You really do think that, like, it's going on everywhere where it's one isolated thing.
And also that loop factor is pretty new, like, relatively. Back in the early days of TV, there was maybe like one news network or maybe one channel and an hour of news or whatever.
And if you miss the news, you miss the news, right?
Yeah.
You might catch some sort of recap at 11 or whatever, but it wasn't a constant feed.
That reminds me, during the Boston Marathon bombings, everyone in our dorm had the TV on or like the radio on or the computer up or Twitter or whatever. And, we were all getting the same information, but it was like this frenzy thing that you had to be up on every aspect. I mean, realistically, if something bad happened, we were going to know about it at the same time,
Well, it's like that co-rumination phenomena too, where, one person gets upset about something and then they start talking about it with somebody else and they see it and they keep seeing it and then they keep talking about it. And so it builds this life of its own. It snowballs, really.
Right, yeah, it does. This article also says, and I'm curious to hear what you're going to say about this, that since parents are having fewer kids statistically than in the past, that they assign a higher value to each child as well. And I think that's a number of things. I don't think that's just strictly determined by the number of kids that you have. I think it's also kind of like a cultural thing. And then that's also the reason why parents get more afraid on behalf of their children.
Yeah, when I read that, I really thought that it has a lot more to do with social class than it does with sort of the phenomena of parenting in general. I think that middle class and higher parenting contexts place like these greater and greater and greater emphasis on children. If you think about like the history of families and sort of even just raising kids, the more kids you had, there's this theory called diminishing returns that you actually like put less emphasis and less parenting resources into the lower in the birth order.
Yeah.
And so because we have fewer, we do place higher emphasis, but I think that that's more a middle and upper class phenomena.
Yeah.
Not that parents of all spectrum, across the spectrum don't care about their kids. They do, but I think that the hyper focus is really like, I really need my kid to be really good at sports, or I really need them to be really good at music. And so there's this, emphasis on star qualities.
Right. And I think that the part of the reason why that's limited to the middle and upper classes is because the lower classes don't have maybe like the time or the mental focus, like that they're worried about so many other things in terms of like, having enough food and, having like having adequate housing and stuff like that. But then that also, I mean, we talked about this in our class too, different parenting styles, that you have parents who are like authoritarian versus authoritative, and that in some contexts one works better than the other. And we talked specifically about in lower resource homes that sometimes an authoritative style is better because there's actually more physical like danger.
Yeah, well, it's a more risk, a higher risk tendency environment. And so like you were saying, like your mother was really like very focused on like where you were going and what you were doing and whether or not you were coming home after school. And I think that has positive outcomes if you're in a sort of a more disadvantaged or higher crime neighborhood, or even just a neighborhood where there's sort of more going on, there's more variables.
Yeah. So what, I guess, sort of going forward, what would you say might be some results of this that, people, especially I think older generations view millennials as being over-sheltered and sort of like child-proofed themselves.
Yeah, bubble wrap, right?
Bubble wrapped. So I wonder, like, what do you think are some implications for this? And then I have a segue after that. What do you think are some implications of this for actually, like, for the kids?
Well, I think we've already started to see implications. I think that, that hyper-focus of parents, there's a lot of research coming out on sort of that type of, you've mentioned helicopter parenting, but that helicopter parent, that hyper-focused on star qualities and having kids that are really demonstrating internalizing issues with depression and anxiety. And I think that when you don't ever get to, not that the reduction in those statistics isn't a good thing, right? But when you don't ever get to kind of like explore on your own or, I don't know, make a mud pie, eat some mud, right?
Yeah.
Not only did I make them, but I tried to eat them too.
Right, me too.
You kind of need to be able to do that and to fail in little manageable chunks to be successful in adulthood, to be like really, to feel confident and successful that you can like overcome different bumps in the road. And I think that with irrational parenting, that we don't give kids enough chance to figure stuff out along the way.
Yeah. And
that has consequences not only in their mental health, but also in their later career trajectories.